Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Food School Smarter, Stronger, Leaner podcast. In 2020, each Wednesday is going to be dedicated solely and entirely to the science and practice of fat loss, and more to the practice than to the science of it, because no matter how much science of facts we know, if we don't know how to put them in practice, if we don't practice them, nothing gonna change, nothing gonna happen. And fat loss our fat loss Wednesdays are going to be about mastering your body composition. So mastering the amount of fat you want to carry at any point. And I believe it's kind of cool that you can readjust, redesign your body shape as you want. And I personally can say that I mastered that when it comes to my body and when it comes to bodies of a lot of other people. I helping a lot of my clients who come to me specifically because they want to get better at managing and adjusting their fat mass. Usually it's reducing it, and also a lot of people are coming to me to get better body composition, to reducing fat and building muscles and just looking better. And all of it is possible with the right strategies in place. So today we are talking about fat loss, and we are talking solely about food. So we're not talking about sleep, we are not talking about exercise, we are not talking about any of that. We are talking about the practice of food that you can apply on a daily basis without having to do really difficult and complicated measurements or counting calories and grams of fats or carbs you eat, or being on some sort of diet like keto diet or low carb diet, figuring out what those are all about and figuring out all the details of them, right? We are going back to more simplicity and talking about real foods and real meals. So when it comes to adjusting your body composition, when it comes to adjusting your body fat, guys, first and foremost, when it comes to food, you want to have something that you can easily manage and adjust. What do I mean by that? So if you decided that you want to lose fat at this stage, you need to be aware of, for example, how many meals you're gonna have, because if you start working on your fat loss and it's not working, then you need to be able to adjust the amount of foods that you are consuming, of different foods that you are consuming. And in order for you to do that, you need to manage the amount of meals you eat. It's really simple. So I would start with not having snacks and start easily with most of you guys. What is easy is 3 meals a day. I would start with that, and having no less than 12 hours between your last meal and your first meal. So for example, if you finished your meal by 7 p.m., then your breakfast should not be earlier than 7 a.m. For most people, I actually advise, according to the recent science on digestive health, to do 14 hours. So if you finish your last meal, your dinner at 7 p.m., then you should be starting your breakfast no earlier than 9 a.m. But at least if you are someone who's used to snacking all the time, at least 12 hours. Like if you go less than that, there are going to be consequences, and also it's going to be so much harder to lose fat for you. So nothing at all for 12 hours at least, meaning no small snack, no piece of chicken or a teaspoon of honey, nothing for 12 hours, no calories, water, unsweetened herbal tea or black coffee, something like that is okay, but the rest of the stuff is out. So you want to have just 3 meals, that's what works for most people in my practice, and no snacking in between. And so all you have to do to adjust your fat loss is manage those 3 meals a day, your breakfast, your lunch, your dinner. If you want to have just 2 meals and that works for you, that's fine too. So you want to manage your meals, the amount of meals first. And then in those meals, you want to manage the foods you are eating, or food groups. And you need to start measuring different food groups in your meals. So for example, take your hand, and that's going to be your measuring device. And so the size of your palm without fingers is going to be the portion size of your protein rich food, like for example meat, fish, or eggs. So 3 eggs is going to give you 1 portion of that protein rich foods. It's also going to have some fat in yolk, of course, but it's going to give you 3 eggs is going to give you approximately 20 grams of protein. So your palm is the size of your protein rich foods, and in that protein, you want to distinguish 2 groups. Lean protein, where the most calories come from protein and there is very little fat, like for example tuna or chicken breast, or lean cut of beef, or lean cut of pork, or lean part of non-fatty fish like cod, for example, right? Also liver and most organ meats are going to be in that department too, because they usually do not have a lot of fat except for some organs, but most of you are not ever going to be eating those. And then you want to distinguish between that lean protein and fat protein, fatty protein, what I like to call it, and those things like eggs, for example. So for each 3 eggs, you would have 1 portion of fat, or 1 serving size of fat in that. How do I measure that? Well, I know actually the grams in eggs of fat that you consume. So I would say, well, actually 3 eggs will give you 2 serving size of fat and 1 serving size of protein, to be exact. And then fatty fish, I would go for 1 serving of protein and 1 serving of fat, because fatty fish has quite a lot of fat, right? Or if you're eating something like more fattier cut of beef, the same gonna go there. So 1 serving size of protein and 1 serving size of fat. So you want to distinguish between those foods for to be able to adjust your body weight easier and to manage your food intake easier and calories without having to actually count calories, right? So lean protein and fat protein, and you want to distinguish between those. And so, for example, you don't have to even count how much fat or whatever it has, but be aware. So for example, if you decided to eat 3 eggs for breakfast, maybe a scramble, maybe an omelette, maybe something else, maybe you boil your eggs. So if you decided to have 3 eggs for breakfast, then have your 3 eggs. And so if something stops working, like you're not going to be losing that much fat, as you'd like to, then you remove 1 egg, right? Or if for dinner you eat fatty fish, then substituting it with lean fish, for example, at some point will give you more progress. Of course, I do not recommend to go fat-free or carb-free or whatever, because your body needs different foods for different purposes, and you need some, micronutrients, vitamins, and minerals, but not to go really deep into those details. Again, to go to basics, you want to have 3 meals, and you want to make sure that you have food groups that you manage and substitute in those meals. So for example, for each meal, let's say you decided to have a serving size of protein, distinguish between lean protein and fatty protein, right? And so the serving size is your palm, for example. That's a good serving size, because it will give you somewhere around 20 to 30 grams of protein, depending on the source. Then, and if you have 3 of those a day, then that's a pretty good portion of protein for most of you, unless you are a bigger person, a bigger guy, also trying to build muscles. But those are details. They need to be, talked about in specific. So 3 meals, 3 portions of protein rich foods. And then you want to have some fat, for example, right? So if you are not choosing fatty protein, but instead you're choosing foods that are predominantly fat, like avocados or nuts and seeds, or also, of course, butters or oils, you want to make sure that you manage the amount of that fat also. So if you decided to have half an avocado for one of your meals, or the whole avocado, then you want to keep it consistent. And it's not like one day you're gonna have a Thai avocado that is like the size of your head, and the other day you're gonna have a small avocado, like Hass avocado, that is much smaller and has probably at least twice the calories of the bigger, well, the bigger avocado will have twice the calories of smaller one, right? So you want to manage those fatty foods too, and the amount of fatty foods, and also make sure that you understand that there is a difference between fat from whole foods like avocados or nuts and seeds, and fats that come in a bottle or in a package like olive oil or butter or coconut oil. The more refined the fat is, so when it's in a bottle, when it's in a package, nut butter is somewhere in between whole foods and completely refined fat that has no fiber. So the more refined any food is, and fat specifically, the less energy it's going to take your body to get that energy that out of that fat, and also the more digestible and absorbable energy that food gonna have. So what I mean by that, for example, also the same goes to protein. If you one meal you are consuming, let's say, a piece of cod or a piece of salmon, and on some other meal you decided to go for meal replacement and protein shake, so realize that you're gonna get more energy from your protein shake, all other things being equal, just because it is refined into a powder, and for your body it is much easier to absorb, digest, to extract those calories and those nutrients. So just be aware of that again, that the more refined the food is, the more calories you're gonna get from that. And so a lot of clients I work with, even when they're stuck in their weight loss, fat loss journey, just by replacing processed sources of calories, like for example olive oil with olives, or protein shake with a piece of meat or a piece of fish, or let's say something like pasta that is made in processed flour by whole grain rice, that's going to make a difference. And you might start losing fat just because you replaced more refined versions of carbohydrates, proteins, and fat with more whole foods versions. I hope this makes sense, guys. So the more refined the food is, the easier it is for your body to extract the calories from, tissues of protein-rich food like meat or fish, from carbohydrate-rich foods like let's say flour, compared to whole grain like buckwheat or quinoa, or some sort of bean like lentils, right? So the more there is the fiber, there is the different tissues, the more difficult it's gonna be for your body to extract the calories, and the less calories you're gonna consume automatically, and even though on paper it might be exactly the same, and the easier it's going to be for you to lose fat. So for each meal, guys, right, you want to measure your protein. So you want to have protein at each meal, no matter what. You want to keep that constant. And then in your food, you're probably going to have some fat. You're probably going to have some carbohydrate-rich foods like grains or beans, or starchy vegetables like sweet potatoes. For a person who are on a low carb diet or keto diet, someone like me, I would not have that group, but I might have like a cup of berries. That is also considered to be carbohydrate-rich foods, but a little bit different from grains and beans and starchy veggies, because of fructose, not starch, being the source of carbohydrates. That there is a lot of biochemistry involved by but fructose does not raise your blood sugar at all, especially from whole foods. Obviously consuming like high fructose corn syrup is not the same as eating a bowl of berries, so realize that. But anyhow, so you would probably have in your meals a protein-rich food. A good serving size for carbohydrate-rich foods like grains or beans is a handful, giving you somewhere like 2/3 of a cup, 1/2 of a cup, measuring cup of cooked grains or cooked beans. So or again, like small handful, that's going to be your carbohydrate rich foods. And then if you're using olive oil for cooking, for your salads, maybe coconut oil or maybe butter, just make sure that you use also some sort of measuring. You might eyeball it, but for fats, I do not recommend that, because if you eyeball twice as much, and that is pretty easy, then you're gonna get instead of, let's say, 90 calories, you're gonna get 180 calories and more, right? So fats are quite calorie dense, more than twice than carbohydrates and proteins, and so those calories add up fast. And even though, of course, food groups matter, the kinds of foods that you eat matter, it's still, guys, the same. I mean, at the end of the day, energy does matter. And even if you are on the most hardcore keto diet, but you are consuming a lot of fat, several times a day, not just at your meals, but also in fatty coffee or maybe some fat bombs. So if you're consuming thousands of calories plus, then it's going to be pretty damn hard for you to lose anything. And at some point, your body will just not lose anything. For some people, it's going to happen earlier. For some people, it's going to happen later, depending on how your metabolism is tuned. So realize that energy balance still matters. It's not as linear as some people would like you to believe, but it still works in your body. And so if your body is able to absorb much more energy than it needs, it uses at any point, then you're not going to be losing fat. That I can guarantee you. So to sum it all up to this point, so you want to have no less than 12 hours of fasting a day. Like, that is the absolute minimum. If you go beyond that, guaranteed are problems with your gut, so gut health problems, and fat loss, weight loss, that's going to be an issue too, plus increased inflammation and so many other things. I don't even want to start talking about that, because it's a whole nother issue, right? So 12 hours at least, but 14 is much better. That's what studies and science show. And then you're going to have 3 meals a day, and make sure that at each meal you're going to have a serving size that is somewhere around, palm of protein-rich foods. Plant-based, guys, a little bit different. So this is not for you. This is more for omnivorous people. So protein-rich foods are meats, organ meats, fish, eggs, a lot of, mixed sources, as we talked about. So eggs, for example, it's fat and protein. Then you want to have some vegetables, 1-2 servings. Non-starch vegetables are your best friends. Also, like protein, don't be too fast to reduce the amount of those. And I'm talking about broccoli and Brussels sprouts and spinach and collard greens and Swiss chard, all of these non-starchy vegetables. Also bell peppers, raw carrots, raw beets, they're also non-starchy when eaten raw. Mushrooms, so many other vegetables, right? So you want to have at least 2 servings, and that's kind of like a size of your feast. That's a serving of non-starchy vegetables per meal. And then if you're having carbs, have your carbs, but try to get them from whole food sources, and 1/2 to 2/3 of whole food carbohydrate rich foods like beans, like grains, like starchy vegetables, especially sweet potatoes, and then fat. Also make sure that you manage your fat, probably 1-2 servings of fat per meal, different kinds of fat. Like some may come from fatty fish, some may come from olives, some may come from avocados, from different nuts and seeds, right? So again, whole food sources for fat loss especially work much better than fats that come in a bottle. And once you understand the principles of food groups, again, like protein, lean protein and fatty protein, carbohydrate rich foods from whole foods, like beans, grains, starchy vegetables like fruit, and from more refined flours like, let's say, pasta and breads and anything that's made of flour. Basically, those are non-whole foods, carbohydrate-rich sources, right? And then you have your non-starchy vegetables that are a separate group, and then you have your fats that also are divided into whole food sources and fats that come in a bottle or in a package that do not have any fiber or anything but fat. So you want to distinguish between those, and for each meal you want to set an allowance for different food groups, and in different food groups you can substitute foods with similar foods. So if you eat lean protein, then substitute it with lean protein. So if it's lean cut of beef, you can substitute it with lean cut of pork, or a lean cut of fish like tuna or cod. If it's fatty protein like fatty fish, then you can have fattier cut of beef or fattier cut of pork or eggs, right? If it's whole food fat like an avocado, then you can substitute the same amount of avocado for a thing like nuts and seeds and in their whole form. If you use some oil or butter, then you can substitute it with another kind of oil or butter, the same amount. If you are eating carbohydrates, then whole food carbohydrates like beans or grains or starchy vegetables, you can substitute for different meals with the same kind of carbohydrate that comes from whole foods. If you are eating pasta or any sorts of bread, that you can substitute that food for the same amount with the same kind of food, maybe different kind of pasta or different kind of bread. So understand this difference. So different food groups, certain amount per meal, and you can substitute different food groups with the similar foods in the same food group. And that's how you measure, how you manage the amount of calories consumed without having to count those calories and macronutrients, your proteins, your fats, your carbohydrates. And if you are not successful with losing fat, for me personally, as a coach working with my clients, when we want to lose more fat, we never reduce protein, we never reduce non-starchy vegetables, but unless it's a very extreme case of, let's say, an athlete who needs to cut their weight to a certain degree, right? Then we can, but again, protein goes the last, non-starchy vegetables also go the last. The first things that we reduce are processed fats, processed carbohydrates. Then we reduce, and it depends on what works best for your fat loss, and you need to experiment that to figure that out, which works best, removing fats or carbohydrates. Then we remove whole food sources of fats, of carbohydrates, like a serving size per meal or per day, right? But protein and non-starchy vegetables will keep the same. So that's kind of it, manage the amount of meals you have, the amount of foods per food group, and then when you are adjusting the rate or the speed of your fat loss and whether you're losing it or not, adjust the amount of foods in each food groups and only substitute foods with the same foods in the same food group. So hope this makes sense. And then guys, don't forget that micronutrients also matter a lot when it comes to fat loss. That's why, so those vitamins and minerals, because you might be having, your carbohydrates, your fats, but if you miss vitamins, B vitamins, vitamins of B group, then your body will not be able to efficiently and effectively get the energy from those fats and those carbohydrates. As we talked at the end of 2019, we talked all about those nutrients that help you to burn carbohydrates or fats for energy and where to get them. So if you're not getting them, guys, then you're just gonna be starving all the time and be hungry all the time, and it's gonna be like almost impossible for you to stay on your plan, no matter how good that plan was. That's why it's so crucially important to also consume your vitamins and minerals that your body needs. Or for example, things like L-carnitine. If you're not eating a lot of meat, if you're not consuming this amino acid that specifically beef is rich in, for example, then your body might not be that effective at burning your own fat for energy. And again, it's just going to be so much harder to lose fat. That's why, for example, when I work with anyone, I always say, if you're reducing the amount of foods you eat because of your weight loss, fat loss plan, then for sure you need to get your multivitamin, because you are going to be eating less food and it's going to be so much harder for you to get those from foods, right? And then also, I always advise L-carnitine to just make sure that your body has everything it needs to effectively burn fat for energy when it needs to do so. So multivitamin, L-carnitine, plus some other supplements I might advise to people to make sure that your body has everything it needs to burn the fat on your body and to get all the energy from the foods, the limited amount of foods that you are eating. So that's it for today, guys. And again, to sum it up, you want to lose fat without counting calories and macros and going on any specific diet. So you want to start managing the amount of meals you have. So no snacks, just meals, 3 meals a day, at least 12 hours. I would always recommend 14 hours between your last meal and your first meal. Then you want to have, for each meal, you want to have a serving size of protein. Just make sure that it's the same. You can do really whatever you choose to do, but make sure that things are manageable. So if you chose to measure your protein with your palm, and the serving size of your protein is your palm, then that's what you're gonna do. So you're gonna have, certain amount of protein per each meal, certain amount of non-starchy vegetables, certain amount of carbohydrate-rich foods, certain amount of fat and fatty foods, and then you adjust that amount for certain amount of fat lost, or certain amount or certain speed of your weight loss. So adjust your food groups, change your foods in different food groups, always substitute always substitute the foods with similar foods from the same food group. So lean protein with lean protein, fatty protein with fatty protein, whole food carbohydrate rich foods with whole food carbohydrate rich foods, whole food fats with whole food fats, refined fats with refined fats. So that's how you substitute different foods and make sure that you are still managing. And then don't forget to track progress, of course. And don't forget about your micronutrients. Like, for anyone interested in fat loss, I would for sure get a good source natural multivitamin, and I would get L-carnitine somewhere around 1,500 milligrams per day, and I would probably get it first thing in the morning, or somewhere like in the first couple of hours in the morning. And that's it for today, guys. So that's the basics of fat loss without having to count your calories, without having to count macronutrients, fats, and carbohydrates. If you have any questions, if you'd like more details, if you'd like to figure out the best macronutrient split for you, I'm doing this service for anyone who wants. I'm gonna show you exactly, how to measure your fats, your proteins, your carbohydrates, and what foods you can choose for each group for your purpose of fat loss, or maybe you just want to start more balanced meals. So reach out for $20. I can give you your own small plan to start you out in 2020 with more precise plan to adjust your fat mass and master your eating habits. So that's it for today, guys. The foundational science of fat loss. So listen to this episode. If you are not sure about anything, something, reach out and I'm happily gonna answer any of your questions. Especially reach out on Instagram, where I'm the most active and provide examples from my clients' practice, for my own practice, and this week specifically on Instagram for the remaining of the week, I'm gonna be showing you how I'm gonna be eyeball my portions of protein and what foods I'm gonna be eating for different micronutrients. So anyhow, long story short, check out my Instagram to master your nutrition game. Reach out with any questions if you need plan for your macronutrients and better plan for your micronutrients. So also reach out, and as usual, till next time, eat better daily and start mastering your body.